Hello. Going live today. Just decided to do this morning. We're going to talk about Tim Cole. He changed the law in Texas for all of these people who were falsely accused, went to prison, spent a lot of time in prison, and then were okay. Well, we got the wrong person, then let out. Okay, but then after that, guess what? Their lives were already ruined. We kind of talked about this yesterday in our live about did Texas get it right or Texas get it wrong? Well, in his case, Texas got it wrong. And let me tell you something, it was years and years before he was compensated or before it was acknowledged that Texas got it wrong. So that's why we're going to talk about this today, because it was a very important case in Texas. And it shows us how wrong and how bad it really was. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about Timothy Brian Cole. Very, very important person in the state of Texas. So it's okay. So Timothy Brian Cole, he was born July the 1st, 1960. Okay, he died December the 2nd, 1999. He was an American military veteran, a Texas Tech University student who was wrongly convicted of raping a fellow student in 1985. Cole attended 2 years of college, followed by 2 years of service in the U.S. Army. After his Army service, he returned to college at Texas Tech in Lubbock. Cole died after serving 14 years in prison, but was posthumously pardoned. So 14 years in prison for something he did not do. He dies in prison fighting for his life. But then, he didn't do it, right? But he's already passed away. But his family has to live with the fact that he died in prison for something he did not do. Okay, so this is how the law gets changed. Sorry, my necklace turned around to the back, and that kind of bugs me. Fix that. So this is why the law was changed, and this is what brought Texas forward, and this is what changed it for those who are exonerated, who truly were wrongly convicted, is a huge problem. So here we go. Crime in the aftermath. On March 24th, 1985, Michelle Mallon, a student at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, had just parked her car when she was accosted by a man and forced back into the car, and she was raped. The rape was one of number of similar attacks in the area at the time, and police showed photographs of potential suspects to Mallon, including one of Cole, another student at Texas Tech. She picked his photograph and later picked him out of an identity parade when they line him up and say, is any of these people the one? Okay. Cole was convicted by a jury of rape, primarily based on the testimony of the victim. Now, we know that they have done studies where victims cannot recall the actual person. They can't recall what they were wearing. They can't recall what they actually looked like. And a lot of times you will hear when these people are trying to identify somebody, if you watch the tapes, you will hear the cops putting their sense in, and it's leading the person to pick that person. Just think about that for a second, okay? Hey, Cinderella, so good to see you, girl. How you doing today? Yeah, I decided to just jump on and talk about another problem in Texas. I don't know. I kind of got on this kick over here about being pissed off about how many times they get it wrong and what happens to these families and what happens to these people and what they have to live with after the fact. So we're going to talk about Tim Cole today. He's a very important person in Texas. So good to see you. So she picks him out, and so he's convicted in this, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison. While incarcerated, he was offered a parole if he would admit guilt, but he refused because he knew he did not do it. Do you see what they're doing? Well, if you go ahead and admit that you did this, we'll go ahead and let you have a parole hearing. How is that fair? No, it's not fair. So that's another thing that happened to this poor guy. While incarcerated, okay, so after that, Cole died in prison on December the 2nd in 1999 during an asthma attack. His family, later joined by the victims, sought to clear his name through the Innocence Project of Texas. So even the victim realized that she had picked the wrong person. Sorry, my hair's getting out. So she even knew that she finally picked the wrong person. So she joins up with his family to clear his name. Thank God, right? Another man, Jerry Wayne Johnson, confessed to the rape multiple times, starting in 1995. Further, Mullane later admitted that she was mistaken to the identity of her attacker. Mullane told police that the rapist smoked during the rape. However, Cole never smoked because of his severe asthma. DNA evidence later showed him to be innocent, And Johnson confirmed in court that he was the rapist and asked the victim and Cole's family to forgive him. It's been on my heart to express my sincerest sorrow and regret and ask to be forgiven, says Johnson, who is serving a life in prison for two other 1985 rapes. However, Johnson cannot be charged in the Milan case because the statute of limitations has expired. On February the 6th, 2009, a Texas district court judge announced to a 100% moral, factual, and reversed the conviction and ordered that Cole's record be expunged. He's already passed away, though. He passes away in prison from an asthma attack. I'm sure he did not have an inhaler with him because, remember, he's in prison. They don't let him have those kind of things. Judge Charlie just reversed his conviction and ordered that he be expunged. It was the first posthumous DNA exoneration. Yeah. We are supposed to learn from our mistakes. We are supposed to learn from our mistakes, but you know what? They don't. I mean, they keep repeating them. They just, and I'm not being biased towards anybody. I'm not. But it is a lot of people want it solved. They want somebody held responsible, and they want it now. Okay, because we are a system of, well, we want it fixed now. What do you mean we have to wait? What do you mean we can't just? Well, she said he did it. What do you mean, right? It's partly our problem. It's partly the police's problem. It's basically everybody's problem. It's all of our problems. So, it was the first time that there had been an exoneration in history in the United States and in the state of Texas. Cole's exoneration led to numerous changes in Texas law. But here's the legislation that goes with it. The Texas Senate passed legislation to exonerate Cole. The Texas House of Representatives bill passed through committee and then to the full House. After that, it went to Governor Rick Perry to be signed into law. Another bill named after Cole was passed by the legislators and sent to the governor on May 11th of 2009. Look at the period of time that's lapsed here. How long it took. After the bill was named, and it was named after Tim Cole. And so on May the 11th of 2009, this passes. It made those who are falsely convicted of a crime eligible for $160,000 for each year of incarceration, half paid as a lump sum and half paid out of the claimant's lifetime in an annuity, which I think it's good that they do put it into an annuity. And here's the reason why. Because if you take somebody whose life has been totally screwed up like that and you give them a whole bunch of money at once, what's going to happen if they spend it all at once? With an annuity, at least they have income coming in, because them getting a job is still going to be hard. Even though they were completely exonerated, you still got that hanging over your head, especially if you live in a small town. Well, they said he was innocent, but I don't know. People talking behind their back and that kind of thing. So I think the annuity was great. I think it was. So they also the claimants also are provided with free college tuition. That's a great idea. It's a good idea. It's like the people from yesterday, the yogurt shop murders, 35 years later. 35 years later, they're going to go to college now? Okay, because they finally get a full exoneration, they're going to go to college. Okay. Since the Tim Cole Act became law, Texas has paid $99.8 million in lump sum payments to at least 93 people who were wrongly convicted. The state currently pays close to $6 million per year in monthly annuity payments. That's a lot of people, and that's a lot of money. Since the Tim Cole Act became law, Texas law firm, it's called Texas law firm Gleason, Vallis, and Enderman also worked with Texas Senator John Cornyn to convince the United States Internal Revenue Service that compensation for incarceration stemming from wrongful convictions should not be treated as taxable income, that instead it should be treated the same as compensation for personal injuries, which is not taxable income. See, I agree with that as well. I absolutely do. You should not be charging these people taxes on money that you paid to them after you wrongfully ruined their life. No, I just don't think that's right. They ultimately led to the passing of the Protecting Americans from Tax Hikes, and this was an act that happened in 2015. The bill also established the Timothy Cole Advisory Panel on wrongful convictions. I kind of talked about this yesterday, that I think every district attorney's office should have somebody within their office, like a group of people, or not even the VA's office, like a group of outsiders, maybe just people from the county, that their sole job is to look at these interviews and say, did the officer lead the person to make the confession, or is this confession made up by themselves? That's another thing I'd like to see happen. Okay, so this established the Timothy Cole Advisory Panel on Wrongful Convictions. The panel set up to study the causes of wrongful convictions and devise ways of preventing them. Is to report to the Texas governor no later than 2011. So this is kind of some old things that happened. While Perry stated he wanted to issue a pardon, he felt that he was not legally able to do so. What do you mean you're not legally able to do so? You can't issue his pardon? Okay. Oh my, that's not fair at all. Mm. However, on January the 7th, 2010, Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott issued an opinion which cleared the way for the governor to pardon Cole. On March 2nd, 2010, Governor Perry granted Tim Cole the state's first posthumous pardon. But he's gone. I mean, he still has a family left that's dealing with the aftermath of this forever. Thank God, one of the things that happened in this law and the way this works is his family is entitled to collect on that money and that annuity. Thank God. I think they deserve that money, to be honest with you. Then the next thing that happened was this. On May the 19th, 2015, Governor Greg Abbott signed the Tim Cole Exoneration Review Commission into law. The Tim Cole Commission will review past exonerations and make recommendations to Texas legislatures regarding criminal justice reform. So they have a good idea. Memorials and posthumous degree. On February the 3rd, 2012, on the third anniversary of Cole's exoneration, the state of Texas unveiled a historical marker at his grave. In June 2012, the Lubbock City Council voted to honor Cole with a memorial. The statue created by Lubbock, it was by sculptor Eddie Dixon, is the first of its kind to recognize wrongfully convicted people. This $250,000 19-foot bronze and granite statue, paid for by local attorney, don't do that, Kevin Glasshow, is located at the 2500 block of 19th Street and was unveiled in September 2014. I mean, during the first week, March 2015, the Texas Tech University system, the Board of Regents approved Cole for an honorary degree in law and social justice. A ceremony was held on May 15th. So he's gone, right? He dies in prison from an asthma attack because he could not have medical treatment for this asthma attack. He never got to finish going to school, right? He didn't get to finish his degree at Texas Tech. So they just honorarily give him one. Well, thanks, but what does that do for him? See, and I don't mean to be crash, I don't, but it seems to me like it was always like a little bit too late. Too many years had went by. It just goes on and on with these people that are wrongly convicted and how long it takes them to make Texas make it right when they're wrong. It is a long period of time. I mean, there needs to be something needs to happen. Something needs to change where these things can go faster. I understand they need to make sure they do have the right person or they don't have the wrong person. They need to make sure. But God dang, how long does it take to get DNA back? The yogurt shop murders that we talked about yesterday, they had evidence for years that these people did not do this. But 35 years later, they get an actual full exoneration after one of them had already been murdered by an Austin police officer. I mean, that it's just how the system works is really not fair. And I know that nothing changes unless we all rally together to make changes. And I guess Texas has made an attempt when they created the Timothy Cole bill, so these people could get compensation after they were wrongly convicted. And they are paying out a lot of money every year and every month to these people that were wrongly convicted. So they've got 93 people collecting money in this Timothy Cole Act. 93. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people's life was ruined. That's a lot of people who lived through hell. That's a lot of people who didn't deserve what they got. That's a lot of people who could have done something great in this world had they not been falsely accused of something and incarcerated for something they did not do. Because even when they get out, I know we kind of talked about this a little bit yesterday, but even when they get out, just like the small town of Lockhart, and Lubbock is not, it's a big city, but not really a big city. But Can you imagine what the families go through over there? Well, they say he was innocent, but I don't know about that. You know, it's just that it's always there. It's always like this monkey on their back, and it's never going to get off of their backs. It doesn't matter how many times they're proved innocent because they were, and people are strange like this, because they were first convicted. People just believe that there's no way they didn't do it. They had a jury of 12. They were proved guilty. Right there it was. What do you mean they were wrong? No, no, no. Especially these old timers, especially the old timers. They're the ones that's hard to convince that the state had made a mistake. I mean, it's really hard for them to admit to that. But and I'm just glad to see that something is being done to try to help these people in some way. Now I'm going to pull something up over here about wrongful convictions because really, I mean, it's all about wrongful convictions, really. So hang on a second here. It's going to rain today. It started turning a little bit cold again. I was like, no, 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 no. So here's something about this is from the National Institute of Justice. Wrongful convictions occur when individuals are found guilty of crimes they did not commit, often resulting in systematic failures such as mistaken eyewitness identifications, false confessions, faulty forensic science, and prosecutorial misconduct. These injustices disproportionately affect people of color, low income, and individuals with there's over 3,200 exonerations recorded in the U.S. since 1989, right? What the key factors in wrongful convictions are eyewitness misidentification. I'm sorry, guys. Wrongful, it's eyewitness misidentification. The leading cause playing the role over 25% of these cases because the person thinks that's the right person, but they're not sure, but they just say it anyway, right? And I'm sure that if you're standing there and you're looking at a group of people in a lineup and you're a nervous wreck, you're hurt, you're still dealing with your own trauma from the situation, I can see how easily it would be for you to make this little mistake. I get that. I understand. But it's still, I don't think that these people do it on purpose. I just feel like they feel pressure from the cops, from everybody involved to pick someone out of that group, and they do. I just think it's kind of like a systematic problem there that happens. It's trauma. It's the things surrounding you. It's the we want justice. It's all of that. Official misconduct. Police or prosecutors concealing evidence or coercing witnesses found in 57% of the cases. Now, when I'm talking about coercing witnesses, that's what I'm talking about. Are you sure it's not one of them? Are you sure it's not one of them? That kind of thing. Are you sure? Kind of looks like that picture. You know, they're not really supposed to say anything to them. They're supposed to let them just make the decision. But I'm pretty sure that that's not exactly how it happens. You know. Then the other part, false confessions. Now, false confessions are a huge discussion because people are like, how can you falsely confess to something? But we saw that happen in the yogurt shop murders. And again, you've got people who are sitting there for hours and hours and hours, and finally they're tired of it, like, whatever you want me to say, and they just say it. And what does the cop start doing? Oh, he confessed, and he starts writing up the report. That's how that happens, right? Then there's unreliable forensic science, misapplication of forensic techniques. Now that kind of comes back to our shaky baby syndrome case that we talked about yesterday as well. Junk science. There's a lot of junk science when it comes to forensic sciences. A lot of things have changed now that technology's changed. A lot of the forensics behind all of this has changed as well. So I'm going to look, and then there's perjured testimony. Now, perjury does not happen as often as all the rest of them. False statements by witnesses or jailhouse informants. Jailhouse informants, you cannot trust them at all because what is their goal? See, a jailhouse informant has a goal. He wants to get something special so he can get out. So he's going to say whatever he needs to say, whether it's false or true. The thing about it is, a jailhouse informant, okay, if I was a trial attorney, a defense attorney, and somebody said, well, you know, we got a jailhouse attorney, a jailhouse defendant over here, so blah, 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 and he's going to testify, I would be going, wait a minute, he is in jail for a reason. What makes you think I can trust anything he's going to tell you, the jurors, or the court? Now, I would not believe him. I would not allow that to happen to my client. I just wouldn't, because I'm going to say 9 times out of 10, it's false. It's not right. It's just whatever they need to say to get themselves a better deal. So we're going to go over to the National Institute of Justice, and we're going to look at wrongful convictions. And I'm going to guess that Texas, I want to know which one of the states has the most wrongful convictions. I'm going to guess it's probably Texas. Now, I could be wrong, and I hope I am wrong. I know Texas is a bigger state, so therefore we should have more wrongful convictions, but I'm not sure. Okay, so which state has the most? Here we go. Oh boy, has the most wrongful convictions. Okay. I'm going to look up it fresh. Just go ahead and look at it right here. Okay. Based on data from the National Registry of Exonerations, Texas, Illinois, and California consistently rank in the states with the highest numbers of recorded wrongful convictions. As of 2024, Texas reported the most new exonerations. Okay. While Illinois and California have historically high competitive numbers, often driven by police misconduct in the large cities, like large cities in Chicago. Well, there's a lot of police misconduct, right? Texas leads the nation with 363 total exonerations in the last 30 years. The recent high numbers, 26 in 2024. 2024, Texas has 26 exoneration cases. They're often tied to misconduct by narcotics officers, such as the cases involving Gerald Goins. We're going to have to look him up now. Let's look up Gerald Goins and see what happened here. Well, that's good to know. Let's see. Gerald Goins. What happened to this poor man? Okay. Oh, my dogs are down there. They're starting to do the zoomies in the living room. I can hear them running. It's too funny. Ex-Houston cop Gerald Goins sentenced to 60 years in prison. He was a police officer. Now that is not good. Let's go ahead and read what happened here. Come on. Former Houston police officer Gerald Goins has been sentenced to 60 years in prison after being convicted on 2 counts of felony murder for his role in the Harding Street drug raid in 2019. Gaines, who was 60 years old, was sentenced to 60 years for each count of the felony murder for the deaths of Dennis Tuttle and Rogina Nichols. He'll serve 60 years for each count concurrently. He was also fined $10,000. He'll be eligible for parole in 30 years, just after the former cop turns 90 years old. Now, what kind of a sentence is that? He's 60 years old. He's got to serve 60 for each murder, but he'll be eligible for parole after 30 when he's 90 years old. How does that work? After the sentencing came and Goins' defense team said they were planning to appeal the verdict. We still don't believe legally that he is guilty, says this defense attorney, Nicole DeBoard. That's Nicole DeBoard, sorry. We look forward to having the appellate courts review this. In the hallway right outside the courtroom, Brian Tuttle said his family found solace in the verdict. However, one question continues to remain unresolved. Why did this happen? That's what I would like to know. What is the motive? Why their house? We know that this was baseless, he said. We'll continue to press and maybe someday get an answer. On January the 28th, 2019, an HPD narcotics squad executed, this was the no-knock search. This was a big deal in Texas, this no-knock search that went wrong. It was the wrong house. Okay? So they went to 7815 Harding Street, the home of Dennis Tuttle and Rogina Nichols. Shots were fired shortly after officers entered the house. The drug raid left the couple dead while wounding multiple officers. In the wake of the incident, an internal investigation found that Goins, who led the raid, fabricated a story about a confidential informant purchasing heroin from the couple's home in order to obtain the no-knock warrant. Investigators found no heroin in the home during the raid. The investigation led to several charges being filed against Goins and his then partner, Stephen Bryant, and the other officers involved in it. This is an interesting story. Okay, let me unplug this so I can pull it over here. Goins specifically was charged with 2 counts of felony murder, among other charges. Last month, more than 5 years after the botched raid, his murder trial began. And this is the timeline. Let me see if I can pull this up without messing it up. Yeah. Let's see, is this the timeline right here? Okay. January the 28th, this happened. Shortly before 5 p.m., undercover officers with the Houston Police Department's Narcotics Division executed a no-knock search warrant at 7815 Harding Street in the Pecan Park neighborhood in southeast Houston. According to HPD Chief Art Acevedo, okay, Art Acevedo used to also be the police chief over here in Austin, Texas. Okay, says the first officer who made entry was attacked by a pit bull and shot and killed the dog. The dog was just doing his job. Again, this no-knock happened at the wrong house. Acevedo says Dennis Tuttle, the homeowner, shot at the first officer with a .357 Magnum revolver and hit him in the shoulder. When the officers fell onto the couch in the living room, Tuttle's wife, Regina Nichols, started making a move for the officer's shotgun and was consequently shot and killed by another officer. Tuttle was killed in the continuing shooting. 4 officers were shot, 2 of them in the face, 1 in the neck, and 1 in the shoulder, and who suffered serious knee injuries that required surgery. It is terrible, isn't it, Cinderella? But you know what? This is one that's being talked about. But how often does this happen that nobody ever talks about it? It never hits the news. We don't get to read the story. We don't know about it. It happens all the time. Tuttle was killed in the continuing shooting. Okay. At a press conference about the raid with Chief Acevedo and Mayor Sylvester Turner, the Houston Police Officers Union president, his name was Joe Gamaldi, becomes angry about the officer's shot and appears to threaten people. Yeah, I think a lot too. So this guy starts to threaten the people because they were questioning the police officers. Well, because he's like, what do you mean you're questioning the police officers? You have the right to question police officers and what they're doing, because a lot of times they are not right. It's based on informants giving them information that again can be very wrong, and they don't take the time to truly investigate before they jump in there and do this shit right here. Now, since this happened, they have changed the law, and there's a ruling on no-knock warrants now. I'll have to look that up, but I don't think we'll see this happening again. So here we go. We are sick and tired of having targets on our back, he says. We are sick and tired of having dirtbags trying to take our lives when all we're trying to do is protect this community and protect our families. Enough is enough. If you're the ones that are out there spreading the rhetoric that police officers are the enemy, just know we've all got your number now. We're going to be keeping track of all of y'all, and we're going to make sure that we hold you accountable every time you stir the pot on our police officers. In other words, he's threatening people. He's out there threatening people. Okay. January the 29th. This is just a timeline from the incident. Neighbors and family members of the killed couple paint a picture of them that doesn't fit those of the dangerous drug dealers. I don't buy it at all, Tuttle's sister Elizabeth Ferrari told the Houston Chronicle. Not one hot minute. When you're scared, when someone knocks down your door, of course you're going to react, one neighbor says. At a press conference at Memorial Hermann Hospital, Chief Acevedo reveals that officers found marijuana and white powder, which later turned out to be cocaine, at the house. No other drugs were found. Okay, well, all right, listen. No, I don't do drugs, and I'm not a proponent of them. However, if it's in their own home and they're not out there driving around and they're just minding their own damn business, I don't know. That's an iffy situation, isn't it? Law or no law, they're in their own damn house. Chief Acevedo, this is on the 30th, January the 30th. Chief Acevedo releases the search warrant for the no-knock raid on Twitter. The officer who signed the affidavit wrote that a confidential informant, again, purchased heroin from the house at 7815 Harding Street and told the police that he saw more and that there was a semi-automatic handgun. So you got a drug person going in there to buy some drugs, and he sees a handgun. And he's a paid informant of the police department, and so he goes and tells on them. Okay. The warrant gives officers permission to enter the house without first announcing themselves based on probable cause that knocking would be dangerous, futile, or would inhibit the effective investigation of the offense. I don't believe so. I believe had you knocked on the door and said, hey, we have a search warrant, if you would have backed off, you would have done your search, you would have found whatever there was to find. So I don't buy that they had to do the no-knock warrant. No, I don't believe that at all. I just don't believe it. Yeah. On January 31st, Acevedo says HPD had received a call from someone who said her daughter was doing drugs in the house, at that there were drugs and heroin, which started an investigation into 7815 Harding Street. Addressing the HPOU, President Gerald, his name is Gamaldi's comments, Acevedo says they were over the top and not helpful in the police department's relationship with the community. He says HPD's Internal Affairs Division and the Harris County District Attorney's Office are investigating the operation, and they should have investigated it. And now we're over here on, so that was January the 31st. Now we're over here on February the 7th. The Houston Police Officers Union confirms that one officer connected to the raid is relieved of his duties pending investigation. All of them should have been relieved of their duties pending the investigation. They should not still be on the streets, because at that point, I believe they're dangerous. They're afraid and they're dangerous because they know something went wrong during this no-knock search. On February the 15th, documents show that the lead officer of the raid, Gerald Goins, is accused of lying on the affidavit to obtain a search warrant. Goins' informants that internal affairs investigators spoke with deny having ever been to that house on Harding Street, let alone having made a drug buy there. Acevedo says he expects criminal charges. Okay. February the 18th. At a town hall meeting with Chief Acevedo and Harris County DA Kim Ogg, the frustrated community members and activists request the end of the no-knock search warrants and criminal charges for all the officers involved of the fatal raid. So it comes back to, you got an informant. I mean, I see this informant on the street. He says he didn't say any of that. That didn't even happen. So now we have a police officer say, well, that it did. Okay. Well, we've got an informant, we've got a police officer. Are informants known to lie? Yeah, they're known to lie. Because let me tell you something. If the only people that the police department approaches to be a informant is somebody they've got something over on. They're not gonna come up to a person like me who's, just a little old lady over here with just a YouTube channel and just being a housewife. They're not going to approach me to be an informant because there's nothing I know to gain anything from anywhere. But they are going to approach a known drug dealer, a known criminal, somebody with a record that they think they can use to get a bigger bust on. They're going to use this informant to get something bigger, because their whole goal is, I want to protect the community, number one, but number two, I want to get a record-breaking case. Yeah. Think about that. Okay, and a lot of people are going to disagree with me, and that's okay too. And if I understand, I really do. But there's just a lot of things that go on in this situation that cause deaths unnecessarily and cause convictions unnecessarily. Yeah. So then on February, okay, so this is February the 21st. Okay, let me see. Those are, okay, so then they had this, on February the 20th, he says that it was fabricated. An HPD policy goes into effect requiring no-knock search warrants requests to be approved by the chief first. So Chief Acevedo has to see all of it first. The Harris County District Attorney's Office announced it's reviewing all 400 cases, including 27 active ones that Goins worked on during his 34 years at HPD. I think that was the right move. You clearly got a situation where people died unnecessarily from this no-knock search. And the informant says, I never said that. I can prove it, whatever it was. And we've got 400 other cases by the same police officer. You got to question every one of them. You just have to. Because something could be wrong with more than one. Because how does it go? Let me clean my glasses real quick. History does repeat itself. It always does. There's no getting around it. So has he done this before? I'm going to say the question is going to be, yeah, I do believe he has. If you get away with it, you're going to do it again, right? That's the mentality there. So here we go. The next thing that happens, the same day a drug case against Courtney Jacobs is dismissed because I'm pretty sure that Goins was the officer. On February the 21st, Officer Goins, who was shot in the face during the raid, is released from the hospital, and he and Officer Stephen Bryant are suspended with pay pending the investigation. Bryant had first claimed to have witnessed the drug buy, but later told investigators that he had to retrieve that he had retrieved the 2 bags. Oh my God. Okay, listen, they planted this. Here we go. But later told investigators that he had retrieved the 2 bags of heroin from Goins' car. On February the 25th, a second case involving Gerald Goins was dismissed, a crack cocaine possession case against Trevon Cornett. See, it goes on and on with this guy. March the 4th, the Harris County DA announced prosecutors also started reviewing at least 800 cases, 800 of them, involving Officer Bryant, including 30 that are currently pending in court. On April the 1st, neighbors' cell phone video of the raid's aftermath emerges and poses new questions. It shows 2 shots were fired in quick succession, 30 minutes after the raid was over, and officers seemed to negotiate with someone in the house long after Tuttle and Nichols were presumably already dead. Who was in the house? There was a third person there. May the 13th, an independent forensics team finds multiple pieces of evidence left behind at the scene. It also finds no evidence that there was any shooting from inside to outside of the house. They say blood of the dog that the police said was attacking the first officer through the door and consequently shot was found 15 feet away from the door. So even that part was a lie. He killed an innocent dog. On May the 15th, the Houston Police Department turns over a report of its investigation into the raid to the Harris County District Attorney's Office. On June the 20th, the Harris County District Attorney's Office warns that HPD that it will serve the department with grand jury subpoenas if it doesn't provide records related to all confidential informants who worked with Narcotics Squad 15, the team that conducted the raid. From January the 1st, 2014 to the present, HPD complies 4 days later. This is a lot of cases they're looking at. July the 25th, attorneys for Regina Nichols' family had told news conferences to reveal new forensic evidence that seems to contradict the police narrative of what happened. Attorney Mike Doyle says ballistics reconstruction and DNA testing shows that Nichols was shot by someone outside the house, firing through the wall where she could not be seen. Firing through the wall killed this woman. The team concluded the raid from January 1st, 2014 to the present. Oh my God. HPD complies 4 days later. Okay, so that was that. Attorneys for Regina Nichols' family, after we find out that she was shot through the wall, revealed the new forensic evidence that seems to contradict the police narratives, okay, and says that the police said an officer shot Nichols when she was trying to take another officer's shotgun. That was a lie. She was shot from somebody outside into the house and it killed her. They could not see her at all. Why? Why did this happen? What's really going on here? The attorneys filed a petition in Harris County Probate Court to depose an HPD captain and lieutenant who supervised the narcotics squad involved in this raid. On July the 31st, the Harris County Commissioners Court approves hiring an additional prosecutor to work on the Harding Street raid, more than doubling the size of the office's Civil Rights Division. Oh boy. On August the 23rd, DA Kim Ogg announces that her office has charged former HPD narcotics officer Gerald Goins, who is accused of lying on the affidavit to obtain the search warrant for the raid, with 2 counts of felony murder and the deaths of Nichols and Tuttle. Former Officer Steve Bryant is charged with tampering with government documentation for allegedly lying on his offense report. November the 20th, the FBI arrests former HPD officer Gerald Goins and Stephen Bryant, along with Patricia Garcia, a neighbor on Harding Street who called 911. Goins is charged with 2 counts of violating the victim's Fourth Amendment rights, which protect against unreasonable searches. The indictment alleges that Goins' search warrant for their house included false statements, which ultimately led to their deaths. Goins is also charged with 3 counts of obstructing official proceedings by falsely stating on 2 separate occasions that a confidential informant had purchased narcotics at the house on Harding Street, and falsely stating that once they had purchased the narcotics there, both Gaines and Bryant are charged with obstructing justice by falsifying records. According to the indictment, Goins' tactical plan and office report contained false information, while Bryant falsely claimed that the heroin from Goins' vehicle had been purchased from the Harding Street house. The indictment also alleges that Bryant falsely claimed that he had previously worked with Goins on the Harding investigation. Oh, he just lied all the way around, right? This is really bad. Wow. Garcia is charged with lying to 911 operators prior to the drug raid on January the 8th. She allegedly called 911 several times saying her daughter was inside that house. She also falsely claimed that the residents were drug dealers who had machine guns inside the home, according to the federal charges. So the next door neighbor has a beef with them, and she's calling 911 and reporting this shit. Okay, that is so nasty. That is so nasty. On January the 15th, a Harris County grand jury indicts Goins for felony murder and tampering with government documents, and Bryant for tampering with government documents. On February the 12th, 2020, the Harris County District Attorney's Office declares a second man actually innocent after reviewing his case, which relied on testimony from Gerald Goins. His brother was also declared innocent earlier that month. July the 1st, 2020. This is a nasty police officer. Boy. July the 1st, the Harris County District Attorney's Office charges 4 more former narcotics officers from Goins' squad, including 2 sergeants and a lieutenant, with tampering with government documents and related offenses. Goins and Bryant are also facing additional charges. Altogether, DA Ogg announces 15 new charges. That's bad. The Houston Police Department releases its audit report of the Narcotics Division on Twitter in the response to the DA's office telling the Houston Chronicle that it has not told HPD to withhold the report. It should be public. It absolutely should be public. July the 2nd, 2020. State Representative Jean Wu, a Democrat from Houston, calls HPD's audit a joke, saying it doesn't address systematic problems in the Narcotics Division. Wu announces and State Senator Paul Bettencourt will work together to file legislation aiming to improve police transparency and prevent future tragedies. July the 2nd. January the 25th, 2021. DA Ogg announces 6 more officers from the Narcotics Squad number 15 have been indicted. Officer Philip Pelagios is indicted for murder and faces life in prison. Officer Oscar Pardo, Sadell Lovings, and Nadine Ashraf, Clemente Reyna, and Thomas Wood are charged with engaging in organized criminal activity and other first-degree felonies that could result in life sentences. Prosecutors say their role were part of the ongoing attempt to steal overtime from the city. It just goes on and on. HPD Chief Art Acevedo defends the officers, saying they acted appropriately during the raid and were not involved in alleged illegal activity to obtain the search warrant. January the 26th, 2021. Officer Galeglio's attorney, Rusty Harden, holds a news conference with Galeglios and his family, alleging that DA Ogg had political motivations for the murder charge. He says Galeglio shot Tuttle after he shot several officers. The same afternoon, the Houston Police Officers Union holds a news conference condemning the indictments. This is a strength by this DA. This is a stretch by this DA. HPOU President Douglas Griffin says she has overstepped, and our officers will be proven innocent at the end of the day. Okay, so that's how this all happened. But then we're going to go back. Okay, let's go back over here. That was the timeline for this incident. Throughout the nearly 2-week murder trial, prosecutors attempted to pin the murders on Tuttle and Nicholas on Goins, arguing that his lies directly led to the couple's death. Goins' defense attorneys didn't refute the former officer lied, but instead argued that felony murder charges against Goins was excessive. See, I don't believe it was. You lied on the warrant, you caused the people to shoot at you guys under your no-knock warrant that was false, fake, and garbage. In the end, after about 7 hours of deliberation, the jury ultimately sided with prosecution and found Goins guilty of felony murder for the deaths of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas. After the double convictions, the sentencing phase of the trial began. About 2 weeks ago, jurors had heard additional witnesses' testimony to influence the severity of Goins' punishment. Among those who took the stand were Goins' wife and daughter, along with several family members of Tuttle and Nicholas. His own wife and daughter had something negative to say about him in the punishment phase. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. Among those who took the stand was his wife and daughter, and some family members. Defense attorneys urged the jury to consider a lesser sentence of 5 years in prison, claiming that being in prison for more than 10 years would be a death sentence for this former cop. The prosecution swung to the other end of the pendulum, asking jurors to think about all the life sentences that Gerald Goins had handed down. That's true. Defense attorneys, and then they return to the man. They return and the man gets a life sentence that is handed out. Says Keaton thought this is the assistant DA. Last Thursday, shortly after the prosecution began, the closing arguments, Goins was rushed to a hospital. So he's in the middle of this trial. They're doing the sentencing, and then himself, the defendant, is rushed to a nearby hospital. After having a medical emergency in the courtroom, caused a brief delay. By Monday, Goins was back in court, and closing remarks were wrapped up just before 10 a.m. The jury spent the next 7 hours deliberating over the fate of Goins before Judge Veronica Nelson dismissed him at 5:30. By 9:45 a.m. Tuesday, the jury returned and continued to deliberate. Notably, the jury spent more time deciding what to sentence Goins compared to the amount of time they took to find him guilty. Nearly 11 hours after they began deliberating, the jury sentenced Goins around 12:30 p.m. on Tuesday. In addition to the sentencing, Goins also faced a slew of civil lawsuits filed by the relatives of Tuttle and Nichols, who sued the city of Houston, the police chief Art Acevedo, and 13 current or former HPD officers. Goins is also sued earlier this year by a man who claims he was falsely convicted of drug possession because of the dishonest statements made by Goins. The former officer is also facing criminal charges in federal court. Now, that's a big story about this guy. That's a big story. So let me go back over here. Boy, he's a bad cop, isn't he? Just a bad cop. Now, as far as the officers who were charged with falsifying records to cheat them out of overtime, those charges were all dropped. That did not take place. So do I hear a phone ringing? Hang on. No, it's on TV downstairs. Never mind. So let me go back over here now. Now, see, we're talking about wrongful convictions. Is how we got on to Mr. Goins over there. Let me go find why is he listed in this. Hang on a minute. Let me go find out when did his conviction. I don't think he belongs over in this. Let's see. Goins convictions. Let me see if his was overturned. He was 60 years old. I mean, I don't really. Okay. Oh, here we go. What they're talking about is not Mr. Goins. His was not overturned, but out of all of the convictions that he caused, over 160 drug-related convictions tied to former Houston Police Department officer Gerald Goins are being overturned and reviewed following the Harding Street scandal. Prosecutors determined that Goins lied in numerous cases, with 91 convictions initiated for dismissal. 91. One police officer, 91 wrongful convictions. And that's just one police officer. How many more? Think about that. How many more? Making this one of the largest corruption-related exoneration efforts in the U.S. history. Background. Then it goes back over to Mr. Goins, who was convicted for murder in 2024. The Harris County District Attorney's Office began moving to overturn 91 drug convictions, with Goins was the primary officer, with the efforts extending to over 160 cases involving his testimony. Corruption findings. Investigations revealed that Goins, a narcotics officer, consistently falsified information on search warrants and testimony to secure convictions. Now, I want to know why. Why would he do this? Was he mentally ill? Is that why he was doing it? I don't get it. The convictions largely affected people of color and are being vacated due to the taint or corruption, with the Harris County Public Defender's Office assisting in this process. I think that's great. I really think they should hold him to the fire. Wrongfully accused suspects, all by one officer, 91 cases. Think about how many other police officers have done the same thing, and now you've got people sitting in prison over falsified records. That's what I want to know. I'm going to go pull something up over here. Hang on just a second. We're not going to stay on long. This is just a short little live that I wanted to get on and talk about, wrongful convictions and how many and where, and the fact that Texas leads that. Texas leads it. Let's see. Goins. Let me pull him up. See if there's any Goins. Convicted. Hang on. Let's see. That was let's see, Gary Scott. Former Houston police, Gerald Goins. This is it right here. Let's watch this for a second. This is from KHOU 11. Hang on a second. Hang on. Let me share my screen and give full credit to KHOU 11. Okay. All right. And this is our nasty police officer here.
Raid led to a shootout, killing the couple in the home.
Stephen going live at the Harris County Criminal Courthouse tonight with details. Stephen?
Well, it was a big day in court. In fact, Harris County's district attorney called this the most important verdict in the county's history. Of course, we know it meant a lot to the family of those Harding Street victims. Take a look. This was the moment in court where Gerald Goins was sentenced to 60 years. You can see he didn't seem to have much of a reaction. He was slumped over, his head down, and his hands together. This verdict today comes after a lengthy trial and close to 10 hours of deliberation for the jury in the punishment phase. You'll remember Goins was convicted on 2.
There they are, the victims of his crime that got him in prison. 2 people. They look happy. They're just a couple of people. They're very young. I mean, you know, I don't know what was going on in their household. I don't care what was going on in their household, but we do know their next door neighbor had something against them, and so she falsely reported things. And I think that's how he got into starting to oh, did I spell that wrong? How he got into be involved into falsely reporting things about this couple. Here we go.
Counts of felony murder in the deaths of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas. The 2 of them gunned down in that 2019 Harding Street raid. The raid based on a bogus search warrant Goins obtained with false information. Today, Dennis Tuttle's son, Ryan, gave a victim impact statement in court, and we spoke to him afterward as well. He said his family finally had some closure, but there are still questions as to why his father and his stepmother were targeted in their home. Ultimately, he stated he wants an apology from those he says falsely claimed his parents were drug dealers. He said he also wants to see change within HPD.
I think there's some vindication, of course.
That's not enough.
To get that dark cloud lifted off of our family name. That we want every police department to look at their policies. There has to be a change. There has to be a silver lining from the deaths of my father and my stepmother.
Now today, Harris County's district attorney, Kim Ogg, called Gerald Goins a stain on the reputation of honest cops. This is the first time a Houston police officer has ever been convicted on murder charges, according to Ogg. Back out here live, we did also see several members of Gerald Goins' family today in court, but they did not speak to us on their way out. Goins' defense attorneys have already filed an appeal in this case. We're live in Harris County Criminal Court.
Of course they're not going to speak. What are you talking about? But isn't that incredible? 160 other, 91 convictions overturned because of him being a bad cop. I'm going to go look and see if there's any information on his appeal. Hang on just a second while we look for this. Gerald Goins. Okay. State of Texas. Let me see what I've got here. If I can find something on it. Just a second, guys. Okay, closing arguments in the murder. Let's see, XPD. See more. Now, I'm going to show you something here. Now, these are going to be the closing arguments from his trial, and this is going to be, hang on a minute, Fox 26 out of Houston. Full credit to Fox 26 out of Houston. I've got to share the screen. Not there. Okay. Okay, Goins. Closing arguments. This was just 1 year ago. Fox 26 out of Houston, guys.
Story we're following for.
All right, let me give full credit to them. Okay, Fox 26 out of Houston. Okay. All right. And let me make this big. Hang on a second. But before we move on, I want to go ahead and read our statement of, we need to go ahead and do our, hang on. Come on, phone. Stop that. All right. Now, come on. I know I did this yesterday. I found this yesterday and I'm trying to find it. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. It's over here. Let me read this statement to you guys because we need to make sure that we're showing everything under fair use. And I want to read my statement. This live stream may include copyrighted material used strictly for the purpose of commentary, criticism, analysis, education, and news reporting as permitted under Section 107 of the United States Copyright Act. A third-party content referenced or displayed remains the property of its respective copyright holders. Its use here is transformative and limited to lawful fair use purposes. No copyright infringement is intended. All right, there's our statement, and let's go. We're going to go ahead and play this. Here you go. This is the closing arguments for Mr. Goins.
Of former Houston police officer Gerald Goins tomorrow. Well, Fox 26's John
Can you hear that okay?
Us live from the Harris County Criminal Courthouse, where Goins' 10-day murder trial wrapped up, and closing arguments are set to begin soon. Donnelly.
Okay.
Yeah, it isn't something that happens often.
No, it doesn't. Okay, I know they have them because they're on here. Okay. Listen and watch. Here we go. Here's the right one for closing arguments. Here we go. Okay. You make this bigger. There. Go. Okay, let's go, please. All right. This is going to be in the courtroom, and it is the closing arguments. Come on. There.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here at Fox 26, the vodcast room, and we've been closely monitoring the trial with Gerald Goins and his murder trial. We do know that closing arguments just wrapped up. They started today. So
well, you didn't play them.
Sure that
oh, you know what? It might not have been televised. Okay, let me see. Did they televise them? Let's see. Let's see if this is it.
Good afternoon. I'm Sherman Chow. Just in dramatic moments this morning in the sentencing phase in the Gerald Goins murder trial, former HPD narcotics officer had to be removed from the courtroom for what appeared to be a physical or a health issue. We have brand new video of Goins leaving the courtroom, being assisted out, and then later being put into an ambulance. We can report that the jury was immediately removed, as this happened in the middle of the state's closing argument. Goins was convicted last week of 2 counts of felony murder. This nearly 6 years after a couple was shot to death during a botched raid on Harding Street. That was based on a search warrant that Goins admittedly falsified. That is him being put into an ambulance this morning. The resulting scandal resulted in federal and local probes into HPD's narcotics unit, its police cases, and overturned 22 convictions. Goins facing 5 years to life in prison for each felony murder conviction. Stay with KHOU on air and online for updates. More.
All right. So that was from his argument.
District Attorney Fitzpatrick, Bill Fitzpatrick, is giving his closing arguments in the murder trial of Robert Brooks.
Okay,
let's listen in.
Oh, that's the wrong trial. Hang on, guys.
Good afternoon. I'm Sherman Chow.
That's the wrong trial. All right. So at that point, they had done 22, but to today, they've overturned 160. 160. It is amazing how much damage one person can do in a city like the size of Houston. Think about that for a minute. So I just wanted to jump on today and talk about some more wrongful convictions and people who caused wrongful convictions, because clearly Gerald Goins caused wrongful convictions. And now he's appealed his own case. I mean, he was not wrongfully convicted. He actually did lie. He admitted he lied. I don't understand how he can appeal his case. So let me go look and see if there's anything else about his appeal that's been filed. Just amazing, huh? You know, people like to think, well, cops, you know, he's a police officer. What do you mean he lied? Well, they do lie. They have been known to be lying. Okay, Gerald Goins here. I got to spell his last name right if I want to pull his information up. Let's see what it says about his appeal. From a botched raid. It wasn't botched. It was all a lie. Quit saying it was a botched raid. That's really bad. That's really bad. Okay. I don't see any information about his appeal, but we do know that he appealed immediately. So let me look if I can look at the Texas appeal records. Let's see. And we'll see if we can pull up Gerald Goins in the Texas appeal records. Here we go. Court of Texas. Let's see. Case number. No, I don't have his case number. I wonder if we can put it up right here. Goins. Goins. Let's see. Oh, here it is. Over here on Justa. Y'all ready to read about his appeal? Here we go. Opinions. I concur with this court's order granting relief. What? This was dated what date? Okay. We got a lot to talk about over here. Now, wait a minute. Oh, that's John Andrew. Okay. Hang on a minute. There's several Goins people. Whoosh. I'm like, wait a minute. No way. Okay, so his name is Gerald Goins. I'm gonna put his whole name in there and see if it comes up different, because I didn't want to read the wrong one. I'm like, what do you mean? There's no way, because this was just over like a year ago. There's no way it could already be appealed and over with. Okay, let's see. Justa. Here we go. In the Court of Criminal Appeals, ex parte. All right, hang on. I think this might be one of the cases where he lied about it. Oh, it is. This is one of the people. Okay, this is an appeal that happened on behalf of somebody else who was wrongly convicted because of Mr. Gerald Goins. Hey, Sprinkle Donut, how you doing? Good to see you. Hope you're doing good over there. So, I concur with this court's order granting relief to applicant and writ separately to highlight the ways in which applicant has met, if exceeded, the standard for actual innocence. In 2011, this applicant was convicted to 2 first-degree felonies and sentenced to 8 years in confinement. It is uncontroverted that the only evidence used to convict the applicant was the perjured testimony of former detective Gerald Goins. Expect to see a whole bunch of these, because there have been a bunch of cases been overturned now because of one bad seat. Okay. The Houston Police Department. The state's entire case is, as noted in its closing arguments, hinged on Goins' credibility. Goins was the case. The applicant has maintained his innocence from the time he was indicted and has consistently insisted that Goins lied. The state and the trial court agreed that the appellant should be found actually innocent based on complete lack of evidence to convict him. In January of 2019, during the time that the applicant was serving his 8-year sentence, Goins was involved in a nationally publicized botched no-knock drug raid where Houston Police Department officers killed 2 occupants of the raided home. The unfortunate deaths and those individuals were specifically referred to in the writ hearings. The officers were executing a search warrant based on false affidavits signed by Goins. After Goins was indicted in both state and federal courts for his role in those deaths, the Houston Police Department reviewed all the cases in which Goins had been involved since 2008. One such case was the applicants. The investigations into Goins showed that his propensity to be untruthful in his undercover drug assignments. That should be no question here that the applicant is entitled to a finding of actual innocence. Okay, now this is good. Because he's going to be exonerated in his case after serving time in prison, he may be able to file and get money to get his time paid for because he was not able to work because of Mr. Goins. Okay. Says, indeed, to deny him relief would threaten the very standards that we have created to uphold justice and equity in our courts. In the ex parte Elizondo, it's Elizondo. I always spell it I always say it wrong. We explain that to be declared actually innocent, an applicant must prove by clear and convincing evidence that no reasonable juror would have convicted him based on the newly discovered evidence. And then they cite the case. So it is here that the applicant has maintained his innocence, demanded a jury trial, put on a vigorous defense, testified at trial, called witnesses whose testimony supports his claim that the arresting officer Goins was untruthful, and after his conviction and appeal also hired a writ lawyer. Both the state prosecutor responsible for convicting the applicant and the trial court agree that the applicant is entitled to actual innocence. Applicant has gone beyond what is required of him under El Salando. The only testimony that suggests applicant possessed drugs is that Goins, which we know now to be false. Goins testified that he paid $200 to the applicant's brother, who gave him the money, to the applicant who retrieved crack cocaine from the blue can. The applicant's brother then delivered back to Goins. Goins testified that as officers moved to make their arrest, that the applicant removed the blue can from his truck and put it in his neighbor's backyard. Goins also testified that he used police money for which no accounting was necessary. Listen to this. Applicant's new attorneys discovered a sworn expense report filed by Goins that shows Goins did not use $200 in April 2008 to purchase narcotics, and another report from May of 2008 that shows he allegedly paid a police informant $200, again with the informants, okay, for information which led to the applicant's arrest. These facts, which were not in police reports and were not testified to at trial, contradict Goins' testimony. Moreover, the offense report indicates that the drug-sniffing dogs did not alert on applicant's truck from which the drugs were allegedly removed. They were planted there, is what that means. All of the other witnesses testified the exact opposite, that they did not find or see any drugs on the applicant's brother or the applicant. When asked if he saw the applicant with any drugs at all, Officer Raleigh Jordan answered no. And when asked if he saw applicant's brother that night, he answered no. In fact, when he asked if he saw any transactions at all, Officer Jordan also responded no. Likewise, when Officer Kendrick Stringfellow was questioned about whether he found any contraband on applicant, any drugs, anything of that nature, he stated no. Sharmi Patel, an employee in the crime lab of Houston Police Department, also testified that she tested the drugs but did not know what the drugs were, who the drugs belonged to. In other words, she goes, well, I tested some drugs, but I don't know who they actually belong to. Okay. This is bad, guys. This is really bad. Moreover, a witness, Donna Jean Macy, who was living at the location and present during the applicant's arrest, testifies that she's been outside for about 15 or 20 minutes before the arrest and never even saw the applicant with a can, never saw any drugs or drug transactions, never saw the applicant's brother hand drugs to an officer, and never saw the applicant hand any drugs to his brother. The only thing she saw in the applicant's hand was a phone. Witnesses Lester Eugene Locking, applicant's neighbor who witnessed applicant's arrest, testified that he had been outside talking with the witness, Massey, for 15 minutes before the officers showed up, and that he was sure he did not see applicant walk from his truck into the backyard carrying a cookie can or a can with drugs in it, and that he never saw applicant selling drugs to anybody. Applicant's brother testified that when the officers pulled him over and searched him, all they found was 35 cents in his pocket. He's got 35 cents in his pocket, and he's being charged with drugs and sent to prison for 8 years by a lying piece of shit police officer. Think about that. God almighty. He denied having met or spoken with Goins, having received $200 from Goins to give to applicant, having approached applicant to buy cocaine for undercover officer Goins, or having seen applicant with a blue can. He also refused to take a plea that would incriminate his brother and testified that he eventually took a plea because he was told he would be able to get out of jail. See that right there? Well, if you go ahead and take this plea for this, then we'll let you out of jail. But see, your brother's going to go to prison now. Okay, and it was all based on a damn lie. It's terrible. I think it's terrible. Yeah. I think sometimes there's so much pressure to make an arrest. They do whatever they can to make one. It makes me sick. It makes me sick, Sprinkle. It makes me sick, girl. Oh my God. Okay, so where was I? He denied having spoken to blah, blah, blah. Okay. Finally, the applicant himself testified that he did not have any drugs on him or in his truck, that he did not know anything about the blue container, and that he was at the house because he ran his scrap metal business from there and had a receipt for all the cash in his pocket. He had maintained his innocence throughout the trial and the sentencing. Applicant's attorney reiterated that applicant's innocence. Simply put, the existence of exclusively false evidence equates to the lack of any actual evidence to sustain a conviction. At the hearing on applicant's post-conviction writ, the trial prosecutor in the applicant's case testified by affidavit that Goins was the state primary witness into the trial, and simply put, there was no cause without him. She also testified that she was unaware of the expense reports from April 2008 and May 2008, and had she known about them prior to the trial, that she would have disclosed them to the defense counsel. No, don't do that. I'm going to plug this in. Hang on. Plug this back in. I don't want it to die right in the middle of our sentences here. This iPad just eats up the heat. It's over full is the reason why. Okay, so then she goes, in fact, during the first writ hearing, the state requested a continuance to have a canister inspected for appellant's fingerprints. Since Goins claimed the applicant had his fingers all over this canister, the inspection concluded that the applicant's prints were not on the canister. Following the inspection, in the final writ hearing, the representatives for the state reemphasized that Officer Goins was the only witness who claimed to see an applicant in the neighbor's backyard where the blue can was found. Finally, the state also represented, we agree that Otis Mallet is actually innocent. Okay, so they exonerated him. He's actually innocent. And this is a rarity to this day in our system. I want to emphasize to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals my interest in our overriding prosecutorial and the people's interest in seeking justice, not just convictions. And this justice that was done in this case deserves relief. It is telling that Goins, the state's fact witness at trial and the only witness who said he saw a drug deal on the date of the applicant's arrest, refused to testify by asserting his Fifth Amendment at the hearing on applicant's post-conviction writ when asked to explain the facts pertinent to the underlying offense. And referring to the state and federal indictments, the habeas judge noted, it is so sad. 2 people had to lose their lives, and I'm referencing the other case, in order to shed light to the many injustices associated with Goins. She also stated that the court's conclusion that Goins falsely provided testimony regarding the use of police money and questionably affected the judgment of the jury. And lastly, that the court will suggest to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals that the applicant is actually innocent. The court concludes that Mr. Mallet meets the, I'm sorry guys, let me say this. The Herculean burden to demonstrate that he's actually innocent. All right, that's a really weird way to put that. Okay, so he meets the burden that he's actually innocent. The habeas corpus, through the findings of fact and conclusions of law, as well as the Court of Appeals, the reliance on Goins' testimony serves to bolster applicant's actual innocence claim. The habeas court found that without Officer Goins' testimony, no reasonable jury could have convicted Mr. Mallet, and the state would not have survived a motion for direct verdict. In addition, the court found that the only witness who testified that Otis Mallet or his brother were involved in drug transactions was Officer Goins. The court highlighted that the prosecution's closing focused on Goins' credibility and reputation, and the prosecution, not knowing that Goins was lying, argued the case came down to who was telling the truth, the police officer or Mr. Mallet. Now, see, this kind of goes back to the people tend to believe the police officer over the defendant 99% of the time. And this happened right here. This is one of those, okay? Even though now we know he was lying. The court emphasizes that based on new facts discussed below, the court finds the Officer Goins' testimony was false. Officer Goins, who refused to testify to support his previous testimony, advances he testified falsely for Mr. Mallet's case. Finally, the court pointed out that there is no credible evidence linking Mr. Mallet to the blue can, the possession of crack cocaine, or the transfer of crack cocaine. Without Officer Goins' testimony and considering the new evidence currently before the court, no reasonable jury could have convicted Mr. Mallet of the possession of the delivery of crack cocaine. The opinion of the Court of Appeals likewise strengthens applicants' claim as acknowledgement that the jury found Goins' testimony to be true, and we now know that his testimony was entirely false. Police misconduct is the heart of this case. The applicant has proven that the sole witness to the crime is a police officer who willingly and knowingly perjured himself to order a secure applicant's conviction and then asserted the Fifth Amendment right to not testify in the writ hearing. For more than 20 years, we have held that in order to establish actual innocence, an applicant must satisfy the criteria set out in Elizondo. This is neither the case nor the time to raise the bar on applicants seeking or finding an actual innocence, especially when the states and the trial courts are recommending actual innocence relief. To hold otherwise would not only undermine the court's proceeding and make actual innocence an impossibility for the claimant, but it would call into question the principles of fairness and impartiality on which our legal system is based. With these thoughts, I concur with the court's order. So on July the 1st, this was filed July the 1st, 2020. So this guy, who was a victim of a bad cop, gets exonerated after 8 years. He was 8 years. Anyway, okay, so I'm gonna have to get off of here. I just was gonna do a short today about wrongful convictions in Texas. Texas has the most wrongful convictions in all of the United States. And right there, we have proved that most, like 91 of them are from one police officer. One police officer, one bad apple, 91 convictions overturned out of 3,200. What's that tell you? What does that tell you? I mean, we're talking about 3,200 in the United States. Just the United States is 3,200. I don't know how many are actually in Texas, but we do know out of the ones in Texas, 91 of these exonerations happened from one police officer being a bad seed, a liar, and a piece of shit, to be honest with you. Anyway, you all have a wonderful afternoon. I don't know. Sprinkle and I might come back live tomorrow, or maybe later tonight. I don't know. We'll have to make a decision. I just kind of wanted to talk about this for a minute. So you all take care. Be careful out there. Go out there and hug your babies and be careful, please. You know, life is short. It's even shorter with your children when they're at home. You know, once they grow up and have their own children, they leave you. That's all. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.